And for anybody that was not in the past 2 sessions, we do have a pre-law toolkit. So that would really be your first step for all information related to pre-law. So feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat. So if you would like to be added to have access to those resources, feel free and I'm happy to add you there. So similar to the past 2 days, we'll also be recording the session. So if you don't want to have your face on the screen, totally fine. But we will be recording it so that way students and alums can reference this in the future. So I'm going to start recording now, and then we will get started. Oh,
I hit recording.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Okay, perfect. So don't have your face on it if you don't want. Okay, cool. So let's start with introductions. I introduce myself, and then we also have Dean Youngblood-Giles, who is one of the deans of Beyond Barnard, and she's going to be interviewing Michael Ramos. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly, Ramos?
We say Ramos. We Americanized it.
Okay, amazing.
The actual pronunciation should be Ramos, but...
Okay, totally fine. Tomato, tomato. Okay, and then so Michael is, I'm so sorry, I just lost track of the, okay. So Michael is the Assistant Director of Admissions at New York University School of Law, and this is where he facilitates the recruitment and evaluation of applicants for the JD program. So we're super excited to have Michael here to kind of give us that inside knowledge about what goes on the admissions and on the recruitment side of law school. So I'll leave it for Dean Youngblood-Giles from here to ask some great questions for Michael, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Alexa. And thanks to all of you for joining us this whole week. I know I see a lot of repeat names, so glad that you all are taking advantage of this resource. And thanks to Michael for taking the time out of this just crazy times in general to connect with our students and alums here at Barnard who are truly, truly, truly invested in this process of thinking about law school. So really just thank you for taking the time to sit and talk a little bit about the admissions process. So thanks so much to you and the entire NYU team. You've always been a friend of Barnard. So let's jump in, and then that way we'll make sure we'll watch the clock so we can make sure we have time for questions from the group as well. Okay, so first, definitely, and I do want to preface and let everyone know that I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. So if you hear stuff going on, that's life happening in real time. But Michael, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at NYU School of Law.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, but all of a sudden I'm feeling a little bit of pressure because you mentioned that I'm the last one in a series. And so I'm kind of, coming here at the back end. Obviously, we're dealing with certain situations beyond our control. Yeah, a lot of pressure. And then we're doing this via Zoom. So, but I hope by the time we're done, everybody has a good sense of kind of what we're doing here at NYU Law. As my role as the Assistant Director of Admissions, I facilitate a lot of our recruitment, which means that I go to different programs throughout the US to discuss the admissions process, to kind of give everybody a little bit of a sense of what this holistic review of an application means from a NYU law perspective. We try to reach out to different groups, to different individuals who are interested in going to law school, to just really give them a sense also of the opportunities that are available at NYU. I've been with the law school since about 2006. Prior to that, I worked in international admissions. I worked in undergraduate admissions. So I've done a fair bit of amount of evaluating applications from different perspectives. do a bit of our marketing, both in print and online marketing that we do, outreach to those who are interested in applying to law school. So for those of you who have not signed up for CRS through the LSAC, that is certainly something that I would suggest you do immediately. And you know, just become available as a resource to students as they go through this journey. Certainly at the end of this, I'm happy to provide my email. So if anybody has any questions, certainly feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to kind of answer any questions that we may not get to, or questions that you may not want to ask to the group at large.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for offering to do that. And as we think about law school admissions, many of the participants in this call are seriously thinking about this as an option for them. And as we enter these COVID times, the question keeps arising of how will law school admissions pivot or change or even remain the same in light of COVID. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you all are anticipating that COVID might impact the law school admissions, the cycle and the process of review?
So I think for us, the kind of the word that we keep going back to is adapt. We are trying to adapt as much as possible. In terms of the evaluation of applications, it's going to be comparable to the way we have done things in the past. With one exception, I do believe that a lot of schools have adopted a pass-fail policy this past spring, which probably is what applicants are going to be most concerned with. Applicants should not be concerned if they have pass-fail courses as a result of our current situation. And I think that's really where the holistic review comes into play, is that when we're evaluating you, it's not just one thing that's going to get you admitted to the law school or deny your admissibility. So we're looking at different factors, but everybody should know that our admissions team is well aware that there are going to be pass-fail classes on transcripts, and at least nobody should lose any sleep as a result of that. I think something else that probably is going to be impacted is just the way we recruit. We're going to be doing a lot more programming that's going to be virtual, such as this event. Moving forward, we did start having an expanded webinar program the last several years, and I'm sure that's going to be expanding even more. So for those of you who are interested, probably starting in about August, we're going to be offering webinars to kind of talk about the law school application process in general, the kind of programming specifically that NYU has to offer. So certainly we invite everybody to join us for those events.
Excellent. Yeah, that we and our team would love to promote those on our Beyond Barnard channels as well. So we'll make sure we keep in contact as well with that. And as you think about, you talked about review and specifically talking about pass-fail, which a lot of our students were concerned about. So glad to hear that you all are thinking about that. Let's continue with the review process and thinking about students or prospective applicants that choose to be involved in activism and political involvement. Can you talk a little bit about, your reflection on how that impacts a student's application and, how they should really think about how much they should be involved and the extent to involvement and its impact on their application?
So I think everyone probably realizes by now that we have a history of preparing students who are interested in pursuing careers in public interest law. I think certainly activism is a part of that. Our dean likes to talk about now more than ever the value of a legal education and the impact that lawyers have on society. So for us, activism, involvement, students engaging, is certainly something that we are looking at when it comes to the review of an individual's application. So if somebody has an interest in activism, fantastic. If somebody has an interest in music, wonderful. If somebody has an interest in sports, writing, I think all of that plays a role in the student's evaluation of their application. So we are interested in quantitative aspects of a student's application, but certainly qualitative aspects of a student's application are just as important. The big thing for us is a student's journey. You began this by kind of thinking about what do lawyers do? Maybe you have a lawyer in your family. Maybe there was something that whetted your appetite to kind of start looking into this field. So we're really interested in your journey from when you started thinking about law school, what prompted you to apply to law school, and certainly the skills that you are developing in order to become a successful law applicant, law student, and ultimately a successful practicing attorney.
Excellent. That's great. That's great context and really, can you, and this kind of veers off a little bit, can you talk a little bit about the historical aspect of public interest, how the School of Law, NYU School of Law has really, this has just become a pivotal aspect of what, you all are preparing future attorneys and lawyers to do. And it seems it has been brought to light of how important it is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think it's easy for any law school to say that they have a public interest law program. As an applicant, you got to really find out what that means. For us, it starts with our definition of public interest. When we talk about public interest, we're not only talking about nonprofits, but we're talking about government positions, careers in legal academia. Why that becomes important is because it ties into our loan forgiveness program, our LRAP program. So some schools might say that they have a loan forgiveness program, and that's fantastic, but what does that actually mean? Who are the students that are able to draw from those funds? So we start with a very liberal definition of public interest because we want any student who enters that area to be able to obviously afford their education at NYU Law and draw from the resources that we have. So that's one. The second part is the resources. Again, it's easy to say you have public interest, but I hope I'm not crushing dreams, but I hate to tell this to you. Unfortunately, if you enter public interest, more than likely your salary is not going to be comparable to your classmates who might be interested in becoming associates at firms. Please know I don't make the rules up. I'm just the messenger. So what we have tried to done is make sure that students who are interested in pursuing a career in public interest have the resources to really pursue this, really have an opportunity to pursue this as a career. So in addition to our loan forgiveness program, which actually I have to say was the first of its kind, our loan forgiveness program has been around since I believe it's the 80s, and we've had a lot of other law schools model their loan forgiveness program after ours. So essentially, if you make $100,000 a year or less and work in public interest, you will have your monthly debt your monthly federal debt forgiven. So that's one. Number two, we actually have a scholarship that's dedicated to students who are interested in public interest. It is called the Root Tilden Kern Scholarship, and we offer 20 full tuition award scholarships each and every year for students who dedicate their career to public interest. And then the final thing is we actually have a whole center. It is called our Public Interest Law Center that has programming, career counseling, and funding for students who are interested in pursuing a career in public interest. So we really have mechanisms, funding, support for any student who is interested in pursuing that as a career.
Excellent. And those funding opportunities, they're selected at admission once you apply and are admitted, correct? Yeah.
So the way the application process works is that our application for the coming cycle will go live September 1. You could either apply for our scholarships concurrently, so you're submitting your application for admission as well as scholarship at the same time. Some students do opt to first submit their application for admission and then come back to us and submit their scholarship application later, just because we have a January 1st deadline to apply for scholarship. It's two separate processes. First, your application is evaluated for admission. Once your application is evaluated for admission, then it will be, for those of you who apply for scholarships, your application will then be sent to the respective scholarship committees for review. A number of our scholarships do have a interview process attached to it as well, just because in addition to up to full tuition, a number of our scholarships also have a programming component to them as well.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks for that context. And this kind of builds on NYU's priority with public interest and share with us a little bit about how NYU law is really, how are you really trying to dismantle, various elements of systemic racism that is found often in not only like the profession of law in general, but even in law school and law school admissions. Can you talk a little bit about, what you all are doing and your intention and really trying to dismantle this?
So it's a little hard for me to talk about the profession in general, just because I'm not in the, I'm not a practicing attorney, but I can certainly discuss it from an admissions perspective. One thing that we simply do is we have wonderful partnerships with our ALSA programs who do a lot of outreach for us. For those of you who are not familiar with ALSAs, there are student of color organizations at the law school. We work with them very closely in order to identify students, to help us recruit students, to make sure that there's opportunities that our student body is representative of a broad spectrum of society. We do quite a bit of outreach as well. We're in constant contact with undergraduate organizations, SOC undergraduate organizations, as well as first generation organizations. So when we visit campuses, we make sure those student organizations know that we are going to be on campus, so we have an opportunity to speak to them about the programming that's available at NYU Law. We participate in a number of events during the course of the year. You will see us at the National Black Pre-Law Conferences, representing, as well as we hosted the conference one year. We participate in other programs. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the New York State Bar Association's LSAT Prep Law School Conference that takes place every January. You will see us there participating. This is a conference that's organized by the New York City Bar Association's Office of Diversity and Inclusion. So certainly we are participants. And we do also participate and contribute to a number of programs on campus. One program is our Ann Bryce program. This is a program that is funded by Tony Welters. Tony is a graduate of NYU Law. He was a first-generation undergraduate student, first-generation law student. Tony did very well for himself in the healthcare management field. It was his way of paying it forward. So Tony has funded 10 full scholarships to students who are admitted to law school and who are the first gen students to enter the legal profession. So he has made a commitment to this. In addition to the funding, he also offers quite a bit of programming as well. One thing that he does, he actually matches every single Ann Bryce scholar with a professional mentor. Tony is very well connected, so the mentors that the Ann Bryce scholars receive are pretty impressive. So he will have all students with a professional mentor to kind of help them understand kind of some of the challenges that they might have, and also to help them with the transition to the legal profession. His influence is fairly large. Actually, a few years ago, our Ann Bryce scholars had an opportunity to go down to Washington, D.C. They thought it was just going to be a visit to the Supreme Court. And it turns out that the Ann Bryce scholars had an opportunity to have lunch with not one, but all the Supreme Court justices. And the rumor is that one of the Supreme Court justices looked around the table, kind of looked to the left and looked to the right, and they said that they couldn't remember the last time they all had lunch together. So it was our Ann Bryce scholars that took that were there to actually bring the Supreme Court together. So another program that we offer that might be of interest to this group is a trials program. Each year, NYU hosts a program. It's a collaboration that we have with Harvard Law School as well as with Advantage Testing. It's a 5-week program where students who are underrepresented in the legal profession are offered 5 weeks of LSAT prep. So they come to either the campus of NYU or of Harvard, live there for 5 weeks, and they get intensive LSAT prep instruction. Because what we feel very strongly about, it's nice to say, yes, we want to diversify, yes, we want to include, but you certainly need mechanisms, you need tools, and you need to actually have opportunities for students to be exposed and students to be prepared. So we alternate with Harvard each year. The 5 weeks are at each other's respective law schools. However, we always have opportunities where when we're not hosting that year, the group still comes to our campus for 2 days of programming, 2 days of opportunities to explore our law community.
That's impressive. All of that is great to hear, and I like that you said it's more than just a statement or or a banner. It's much more about action and long-term action, and that's really the only thing that can actually matter at this point. So thank you. So let's drop down to some practical and specifics. Before we pivot to allow students to ask some questions. Talk to us a little bit about when you are really thinking about applicants and what makes a successful law school applicant, I would say, And, and what do you think as our students and prospective student law school applicants right now, whether they be current students or alums, are in different stages where maybe internships were canceled or they're interning virtually. When you think about things like that, what kind of skills and experiences do you think prospective applicants should really think about honing as they think about becoming a successful law school applicant? So what would you require? What kind of skills and experiences would you require and think make up a good law school applicant?
Well, here's the great thing about law school. I don't think there's one typical way of pursuing this profession. And the great thing about law school is that there's not one particular major, one particular path. When you look at one of my favorite times of year is during orientation. At orientation, we have something that we refer to as the King's Speech. That's a little bit of kind of behind the curtains, don't share that. So the King's Speech is when our Dean of Admissions gives a bit of a profile to the entering class of their backgrounds. So she talks about the undergraduate institutions that are represented. She talks about the average age. She talks about some of the skills, some of the things that jumped out of their applications during the review process. It's my favorite thing because of just hearing what applicants to law school have done before applying to law school. Our class has been composed of musicians. Our class has been composed of individuals who have climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Our class has been composed of poker players, masseuses. There was a member of the Swedish national hockey team. There was a woman who was a rockette before going to law school. I just love that because it talks about the individual's journey to law school. Now, what brings them is, I think there are just basic skills that they have that are going to be beneficial to you. There's strong writing skills, strong analytical reading skills, an opportunity for you to be able to communicate, and problem-solving skills. They're real basic skills that you're basically have been developing in your 4 years at Barnard. So you are well on your way. But the journey is really entirely yours. Some of our students come to us right from undergraduate. Some of our students take some time off before joining us. Some students pursue careers in politics, consulting work. Others need to take jobs just because they need to pay off some undergraduate debt. So for us, a big part of it is your personal journey. There is not one atypical way to do this. So if you have an interest in working on the Hill, great. If you want to work on Wall Street, fantastic. If you want to travel after graduation, that is fine with us as well. There's an interesting story that I'd like to share with you. I hope you don't mind. We had there was a managing partner at a firm who came to talk to a student group that we had on campus. And he was reviewing applications for resumes for a position. And he came across a resume of a really impressive applicant who had a 6-month gap in their resume. Because the person's other credentials were so strong, he decided to call this applicant in, though he was a little concerned about this gap, but he figured during the interview process, he'll find out what the story was. He called the applicant in. Sure enough, This person was hitting it out of the park. Finally, the hiring partner says, well, what's the story with this gap? And the person's response was, I was actually traveling during that time. I figured I graduated, I had been working. I just felt like I wanted to take a little time to do some self-exploration. So it turns out that they got into this whole conversation about half hour, 45 minutes of this individual's traveling. So the hiring manager's response to this applicant was like, don't leave that off. That was probably the most interesting piece of your resume. So for this applicant, it actually worked for them. They traveled and it was fine. And I'm pretty sure he got an offer by this hiring partner. So there are some things that people think that might look good on an application to law school, and it may not necessarily be good. And there are other things that you might say, I don't want to, so I'm going to leave it off, but that might be the most important part. My point is that a big part of this is your journey. A big part of this is your story. A big part of this is your personal narrative. When it comes to your application, that is certainly something that we're interested in, your personal narrative. We love to hear your journey. We love to hear your story, because when we're evaluating applications, as I mentioned before, we're really interested in having a student body that is representative of a broad spectrum of society.
Excellent, thanks, Mike. And I'm just gonna, Michael, I'm do one more question and then throw it to the students and alums. So that is excellent. I'm glad you are emphasizing the part of your story, your narrative. I think Alexa can co-sign that. We talk about that a lot, that everyone has their own unique perspective and you all want to hear it. In addition to the qualitative, those stories, our students and alums are often concerned about the quantitative, the numbers. So can you just, before we pivot to questions from the group, your reflection on GPAs, LSATs, those numbers, and more so from individuals who take a look at the website and see that median and average number and then immediately reflect on themselves and say, oh, I'm not necessarily hitting it, or I'm just hitting it, or I'm just above it. You know, what can they take away from you today on what those numbers and stats mean?
Sure. So honestly, if we could, we would actually take those numbers down. Just because I think everyone that gets locked into what those median scores are, what those 75th, 25th percentiles are, everyone should keep in mind that, 25% of our class has a score above the 25th and then below the 25th. So you're going to see a broad range of scores behind the scenes. One thing, please keep in mind, there is no cutoffs when we're evaluating your application. So it's not like I'm getting a spreadsheet and putting a red line through anything. Everyone is getting a full review of their application. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say we don't look at quantitative measures in the evaluation of your application, but it's not that simple. When we're looking at your academic record, it's that. We're looking at your academic record. We're not looking at your GPA. It's not so much the number that you obtain. We want to know how you got to that number. So we're looking at the types of classes that you've taken. We're looking at trends with your undergraduate transcript. We're looking at the work that you did. Another thing, LSAT score, GRE. With the LSAT, keep in mind that it's not an IQ test. We know that. It is designed to give us a sense of how well you are going to do in your first year of law school. That is it. So it is one piece that we look at when we are evaluating your application. So don't get, once again, too hung up on numbers. I will say do your best. Don't go in there thinking to just try it. It's amazing how many people have come to me, and when I ask them about the differences in their score, they're like, I decided to just try it to see how I would do. I don't know about you, but my time is more valuable, and I don't want to go into a classroom to just try an exam. First, it costs money, and I don't want to lose a dime. And then second, it's time as well. So it's an exam that you truly can prepare for. So just prepare for it and, try to do your best. So there are the quantitative aspects, but as we discussed, there certainly are the qualitative aspects of your application. The final thing I would say is I get a lot of questions about weight. And what I mean by that is, how much weight are you going to give me for a certain LSAT score? How much weight are you going to give me for work experience? How much weight are you going to give me for a GPA? It doesn't work that way. So there's no metrics involved. I'm not kind of setting an arbitrary point scale for different sections of your application and then coming up with a number. There is a science to this, but there's also very much an art to this as well. Just because as we're evaluating your application, there's really two questions that we're trying to kind of address. The first, if you are admitted, are you going to be successful at our law school? Because the worst thing that we can do is admit somebody and set them up for failure. I'm fortunate that I get to meet a lot of interesting and wonderful people during the application process. But some of them, they unfortunately we just aren't going to be able to offer them a space in our class. We're very fortunate that we do receive quite a number of applications. So we're making sure that those who are admit, we want them to be successful. And then we also want to make sure that they're a good fit for our law school as well. Just because, law school is a lot of time, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of energy. So, and it's a relationship. So we want to make sure that from the get-go, we are building a strong relationship for somebody who decides to commit to our law school.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you for such great insight for our students and alums. So now we want to make time for our guests to ask questions. You can either do the raise hand feature or type it in the chat. So we're, a little shy of about, we have a little less than 15 minutes just because we want to be mindful of time. So we can take a few questions. So if there are any questions at this time. Okay, so we've got a question from Leah, and she's asking, how do you determine merit scholarships?
There's two types of funding that we offer. We offer our Dean's Award, and we offer programming scholarships. I touched a little bit upon programming scholarships. Those were the Ambright scholarships, the Root Tilden Current scholarships. You need to apply for those. You need to go through an interview process. Those are based upon the student's application, also their interest in a particular area of law. If you go to our website, you'll see a list of about 10, 12 scholarships that we consider programming scholarships. They're open for you. Then we have a Dean's Award. Now, a Dean's Award is an award that we offer once a student is admitted. They are automatically evaluated for a Dean's Award. Our Dean's Award takes into consideration both merit and or need-based aid. So you do need to fill out an institutional form in order to finalize the process for our Dean's Award. But merit is simply, looking at the student's academic credentials for the merit-based side of it. The need-based side is just completing the institutional application.
Thank you. And we have Adele, she's thanking you first, Michael, for coming. And then she wanted to ask if the NYU law application has additional supplemental questions along with the personal statement and diversity question.
So our application requires a standardized test, a undergraduate transcript, 2 letters of recommendation, and a personal statement, resume, and any additional information that you want to include, whether it's a diversity statement or an addendum or both. You are certainly more than welcome to attach. It's not required, but there is space for that as well.
Thank you. All right. And I'm looking to see if anybody has raised hands. No raised hands yet. Okay, and here is from Brenna. She's asking, do you accept a 3rd letter of recommendation?
So Brenna, we only require 2. The letters of recommendation, our preference is that they come from academic sources, from faculty members, teaching assistants, who could attest to your abilities to do the work at the law school. If you've been out of school for a while and you have a professional letter of recommendation, you certainly are more than welcome to. You're more than welcome to submit a 3rd letter of recommendation through the LSAT application process. You can submit up to 4. If you have more than 4, you can email it to us and we certainly would be happy to add that to your application.
And Michael, can you just kind of maybe expand upon that? Are that many letters of recommendation actually needed, or what would you suggest?
So some of this is really, we give basic parameters on how to apply to our law school. We like to give the applicant a little bit of freedom in what they feel is important for them. So we give basic parameters for 2, but we certainly are open to additional letters of recommendation, to diversity statements, to addendums. We get them all the time, and applicants are more than welcome to submit them. So it's not like it's negative if they decide to submit additional letters of recommendation. Find that quite a bit, certainly with applicants who might have been out of school for a while, if they've kind of been working. So they'll have 2 academic letters of recommendation, but then they want to submit a 3rd or a 4th because it's a professional letter of recommendation. And they just want to give us a sense of what they've been doing and who they are since they've been out of school for a while. And they're more than welcome to.
Excellent, thank you. That actually helps us even with advising to add that part of it. So a couple of questions just came in. Great, we got some good questions coming in here. So how do you apply for fee waivers for NYU's application? And then also we'll lump 2 together and then we'll keep going. Fee waivers, and then also about what happens if you get waitlisted and what should that applicant do?
So we have a formal mechanisms for fee waivers for students who participate in Teach for America, the Peace Corps, for military vets. If you meet any of those, if you participate in any of those organizations, just email us and you will get a fee waiver from us. We are tied in with the LSAC with their fee waiver process. So if you get the fee waived for the LSAT, we would automatically give you a fee waiver as well. I would also suggest, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, everybody should make sure that they have an active account on CRS. That is the process that the LSAC has set up for law schools to contact you, because a number of law schools will reach out to you and offer you fee waivers to apply. So everybody should make sure that they are active in CRS.
Thank you. And can so a question from Stephanie is asking, talk a little bit about what you're looking for in a diversity statement, and if you recommend that student applicants send those in.
So again, a diversity statement, it's probably similar to a personal statement. My only suggestion is if your personal statement, if you're submitting a personal statement and a diversity statement, don't regurgitate information. Make sure that the information there's a delineation between the two. Just don't be repetitive, just because you want any documentation to address a part of your application. Diversity statements for us runs the gamut, and we're really open to however you see diversity in your eyes. So we have students who are first generation. We have students who are coming from overcoming socioeconomic hurdles. We have students who are going to be submitting diversity statements kind of, you know, really based upon how they want to frame it within their application. Thank
you. And the next question from Alyssa is the difference in how applications are evaluated with the GRE versus LSAT.
So there's no difference. A number of the students who are enrolling in our class this year have just the GRE examination. So it's really entirely up to you. The one key thing that I do like to address is that as of right now, there's a limited number of schools who are accepting the GRE exam. So if there's any schools that you are interested that are not accepting the GRE, then certainly you have you need to make sure to prepare for the LSAT exam. But for us, it's really whichever one you decide to pursue. There's no difference.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael. Any last questions as we wrap up the hour? It's my child fighting sleep. Okay, so I'm glad everyone came, and Michael, we want to thank you for taking the time. Oh, here we go. Adele is asking about clinics, which NYU offers quite a bit. So Michael, you want to share a little bit about the clinics?
So Adele, we have over 40 clinics for you to choose from. I will say that there is an application process for a clinic. You apply for your top 6 choices. I am happy to say you will get one of those top 6. If you don't get the clinic that you want during your second year of law school, you will get it. You'll get priority for that clinic for your 3rd year of law school. We've made a commitment to experiential learning at our law school. So there are enough clinics at our law school for everybody who wants one. So if you are interested in a clinical experience, you will get it at the law school. They're all designed to give you an opportunity to apply what you've learned in class. Some are module, others are actually cases that you will be working on. So those are available. I would add, some are open to 2Ls and 3Ls. Others are just open to 3rd year law students. So one in particular that's become very prominent is our Equal Justice Initiative. It's run by Brian Stevenson. His clinic takes place down in Alabama. Students are, only 3L students are allowed to apply for that clinic. It's a capital defense clinic. The reason is because students who participate in that clinic take the February bar before joining Brian in Alabama. But it really is an amazing experience for our students.
And just quickly, for those students that are joining us doing this intro series for the first time, can you just explain what a clinic is?
Sure. So there's different ways to get credits towards your legal education. At NYU, you have to complete 83 credits to graduate. Your first year is traditional law classes, foundational courses. Your next 2 years are elective courses. Essentially, you could take whatever you want. You are also have an opportunity to take courses where it's a little bit more practical training. So what you would be able to do is take some of that theory that you're learning in class and applying that theory. So it's an opportunity to you to develop real world problem solving skills. It's an opportunity for you to negotiate, learn negotiations. It's an opportunity for you to counsel. And in many instances, it's actually it's work. You're actually going to an office. You're actually working with clients. So it's a way that you can get credits, but also develop some practical training as well. And as I mentioned, you could do it either your second year or your third year of law school. It's something that we have always prided ourselves on, to give students as many practical training opportunities as possible. For us, it starts with your 1L year through what we call a lawyering program, but then it continues with your clinics during your second or your third year of law school. Some clinics are equivalent to a class, others are equivalent to a full course load. So there are some that are, meet for a semester as any other class, others meet for a year. Some are, and as I mentioned, they're a full course load. So if you take Brian's clinic, that's all you're doing for the spring semester. It's equivalent to about 14 credits.
And thanks for explaining that. That is something that we talk to prospective students about. This is very important to look into those when you're thinking about where you're going to go to law school, because that's a lot of time and you want to make sure there are going to be options, of course, that you have interest in it. And even your interest may shift once you get into law school, and just to have options as well is very important. But thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. I mean, this has been extremely informative, informative to me as an advisor of students and alums who are thinking about this process. And I'm sure to our students and alums on the call, this has been extremely, extremely informative and helpful as they think about this process. Thank you to all of you for logging on. It's been tremendous engagement these past few weeks in these sessions, and we're just so happy to have you all. And thank you for Michael for taking out the time to join us. Michael put his email address directly in the chat. So he is, utilize that as a resource. He can answer questions. If there's something in particular that you wanted more information about, please feel free to email him. You can always also email us at beyondbarnard@barnard.edu. This is recorded, so we are going to upload it to the Beyond Barnard YouTube page, so you can go back and watch it again if you just want to take that time. But thanks again to all of you. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for joining us.